number one class here in the 2022 cycle, but that's not it. It's the highest rated class of all time. They beat out the 2021 Alabama class. So it's crazy that we just had this record break, because for a long time, we were looking at the 2010 Florida class as the gold standard of recruiting. And the fact that that lasted for more than a decade and it has been broken twice is really an interesting and perhaps significant development from this Texas A&M 2022 class. Thank you to Chris Hummer, who basically we might as well just say is a friend of the program at this point. He's either been mentioned or on this show a good bit. They signed 7 of the top 34 composite 5 stars. That is, they've got 16% of the nation's top 100 recruits. But this is the fact that Jimbo Fisher kept coming back to. They signed a top 8 player at every position. And that's what Jimbo Fisher said when he was on CBS Sports HQ. He said, we went at every position group because we had needs at every position group. So they did not only answer it with they did not only answer it with a body, they did not only answer it with a player, but they did with one of the 8 best players in the entire country at this position. This also brings about an interesting new conversation, which is the expectation based on history is that Texas A&M should win a national championship with members of this class on board. But I'll let you get first crack at it because you know the actual class. But is it fair for us to go ahead and set this as the standard that in the next 3 to 4 years, we will see Jimbo Fisher hoisting his 2nd national championship?
I mean, if you have more than $100 million guaranteed in your contract and they give you a trophy with a blank, date plate on it, and you go out and you sign the highest rated class of all time, not just of this year, but you go say, hey, Nick, I saw what you did last year. Guess what? New record. Then yeah, the expectation is going to be that you win a national championship in College Station while this class is on campus. In fact, in the playoff era, every number 1 overall class has won a national title while it's been on campus. So that's a pretty good streak to uphold. It's actually just as strong as the blue chip streak almost at this point. So if you look at this, there are elements of this class that remind me of things that recent classes have done. Okay, so this defensive line class reminds me a lot of what Clemson had on the field when they were still getting to the playoff, when they had no real business doing so, when they had Kelly Bryant playing quarterback for them, right? You had Dexter Lawrence, you had Christian Wilkins, you had Austin Bryant, Cleveland Farrell. Guys, Walter Nolan is built like a Dexter Lawrence or an Albert Hainsworth. These guys are really, a lot of them are on Andrew Ivins' freaks list. Shamar Stewart can be, like we just got done saying, a true 3-down guy who can stop the run. They got a kid out of Arizona, who Anthony Lucas, who I saw when he was a freshman there in the Alamo Dome at the All-American Combine, and I shook his hand. He grabbed me as a freshman, like up to my forearm. These guys are different on the defensive line. And then on the other side, they kind of have a little bit of element of that Alabama receiver class from 2017 to it.
That'd be
Evan
Judy,
Stewart,
Devonta Smith, and
Henry Ruggs, who, obviously we speak of in different tones now, but at the time, what made Ruggs special was he was a basketball guy who ended up, he's also fast as hell and he can jump out of the gym. Evan Stewart is like that to me. He is legitimately track fast. Like, oh snap, this is bad. If you're a defense, every time he touches the ball, pretty good leaper as well. I think he can really be something. And Marshall is a guy, a good route runner, bigger body guy, can still be explosive. They have a lot of complementary pieces in this class. But A&M has already been so damn good in all of these areas, except for one. And we talk about this, I don't know, once a month. What does A&M need to do? They're like, top 10, top 5, top 20 in all these categories. My sheet's nice and green. And then there's that one cell. They're 114th in passing explosiveness. That is the one thing that holds this team back consistently. Now there's really no excuses. They also signed a top 20 player in the whole country, Connor Wegman, at quarterback. So if you want to take that next step, get the ball back a lot for your offense with this incredible defensive line, and then don't try to go on slow, methodical drives every time. Hit home runs, throw knockout punches with this receiver group and this quarterback. I think they can probably do it.
I will say, if this Texas A&M class wins a national title, it won't just be because of this class. It's going to be because of the record-setting class and the other top 10, top 5 classes that Jimbo's been stacking around it too. But I will also say, going back to your point about how every number 1 class in the playoff era has won at least one national title while they were on campus, This is a little different to me because if you think about what are the teams that have done it? Alabama, Georgia, and was Ohio State one of them? Did they have a number one class one of those years?
Yeah, it was that urban class, I believe.
Yeah. Well, Ohio State went through the Big Ten. Georgia went through the SEC East, and Alabama's Alabama. Texas A&M has to get through Alabama in the SEC West first. So I would say that is a problem. But I mean, shoot.
Like, no, I mean, it doesn't. That's why I think it's interesting because Texas A&M has arguably like the toughest road to be able to reach the national championship, and that includes decades upon decades of a lot of investment and even some recruiting success and no national championships. And that's why it's like, okay, this is a new expectation. This is an expectation that, like you said, Bud, was there when Jimbo Fisher was first brought to College Station. But when we add another a historical layer to this conversation, you say, okay, all right, like tick, tick, tick. Like this, when's this thing going to be delivered?
And they were what, top 5 the last 2 years, or at least top 10 for sure.
Marvin Leal's like class was the first one that popped for me. And I guess he was a junior this year. So 3 years ago felt like I was like, oh, they're starting to bring different. And I agree with you, but it's the line of scrimmage. It's the way that Jimbo recruits the line of scrimmage. And just, I don't know if we want to stay on the class, but I was reminded today that one thing that Barton Simmons always said on our signing day conversations is that Jimbo Fisher is a terrific closer, and he would always use closer, and he would always talk about the way that he handled these recruitments. And, Harold Perkins wants a Texas A&M commit even earlier in January, but ends up going to LSU. But you close it out with Shamar Stewart. We're sitting here recording at 5:26. I'm going to make a prediction. I wouldn't be surprised if Jacoby Matthews ends up going Texas A&M as well, 4-star safety, adding to an already historic class. I could be way off about that, but it's at least potential based on some of the research that I've been able to gather right now. And so it's like Jimbo Fisher is a really, really good recruiter, even going back to Florida State, and his ability to close the deal with these blue chip prospects is not something that's unique to name, image, and likeness, and not something that's unique to what's going on right now. It kind of always has been the book on why we consider Jimbo Fisher a good head coach.
But is there like another side of this sword? Is there another side of this sword in that now Texas A&M has the greatest recruiting class in the history of recruiting? They have to win quick. Like if they go 8-4 this year, is Jimbo in trouble? Because I don't think it's realistic to think that this class just shows up on campus right away and all of a sudden you're going to beat Alabama in the SEC West. So I wonder what this does as far as the pressure on Jimbo as far as winning and how quickly they want him to win.
So I think it's an interesting idea. There's a couple ways we can go with this. First, I don't think there's going to be I definitely don't think Jimbo would be in trouble. Will he hear chatter if they don't start to win bigger sooner? Yeah, sure. I think that's probably fair chatter, right? You want to take these studs you sign and turn them into wins in addition to just sending them off to the NFL, which I'm sure is the player's ultimate goal. I talked to Cooper Patagna about this today a little bit, and one of the questions was, hey, if they go 9-3 again or 8-4, can they sustain this level of recruiting? And that would kind of depend on who you ask, right? If you ask Lane Kiffin, which I know we can get to those comments, I think he'll probably say yes, even though he said he was joking. If you ask Jimbo Fisher today, I think Chip might have a drop on this. He didn't think that NIL really had anything to do with the class. I do think, though, that A&M is doing a tremendous job with NIL overall, right? And you cannot use it as an inducement to get these players to come to your campus, but you can certainly let those players know what guys on your current team have lined up and may have coming down the pipe. I do think they got the jump on a lot of folks with NIL, being super ready and organized, and I do think in the future, more teams will catch up with NIL. And so while it can't be used as an inducement, guys, I think more teams will probably be prepared to disseminate the information of what their players are getting on campus already, if you catch my drift. So I do think if you're going to keep recruiting at this level, in order to do so, you probably need to win a few more games. But this is historic. I mean, they could drop back to a top 5 class next year, potentially, and their 3-year run is still going to be as good as almost anybody's, with the exception of like a Georgia Bama.
Yeah, the last 4 recruiting classes from 2019 to this year. Thank you to Coco for dropping this for us. 4, 6, 8, and 1. When you're talking about the blue chip ratio and stacking together the kind of talent that you need to compete for national championships, that is 100% the way to do it. Do you want to start with Jimbo on CBS Sports HQ earlier today before his press conference?
I think, well, what should we go first? Should we go Kiffin first? Because it's pretty obvious that Jimbo is, to me, I took that as him responding to Kiffin's comments.
Okay. This was, here, we'll start with this because this was on CBS Sports HQ.
Knowledge of it. What is the biggest misconception out there relative to what actually is going on?
No funds or all these things that people were talking about in the high school kids for sure. Players in your team, they do get those things. We were one of the lower ones. If I remember right, it was Nick who brought up his quarterback got $1 million deal. And that was great. Ohio State put out an article that they had the highest NIL deals of anybody in the country, which is legal. It's all legal. It's fine. But that had nothing to do with this class or anything else in which it went on. This was hard work by our staff. And I say it's insulting to the kids who come here that you insinuate that. And people insinuate that that things were taken off a message board. Bro Bible by a guy named Sliced Bread, whoever the heck that is, who has no clue about what goes on. But NIL is here to stay in college football. It's going to be a factor in college football. There is no doubt in the future going forward. And so in the transfer portal. So it's here to stay. But those reports and the things that people say are very irresponsible. And then people need to figure out the truth before they do it. There's a lot of reputable people in this business who I really respect that copied that. There was a vice president of Notre Dame who even said that, who off a message board. Come on now.
This is what's going to get chopped up this summer. Not that was very, very good. But then he followed that up at the press conference because you're right. He is shooting back at SEC coaches that are either on the mic, on the record, or behind the scenes to other coaches or to recruits. The way that he is treating Texas A&M as though they have been victims of bad press, which, you just got the best, highest rated class of all time. But anyway, here's Jimbo with all the swagger of somebody who just secured the highest rated class of all time.
And I'll tell you what, I know how some of those guys recruit too. Go dig into that. I know the history, I know the tradition, I know things. Trust me, you don't want to go down that avenue. It's ridiculous. And it's irresponsible. It's unbelievable. I ain't just talking about one. Multiple people got NIL issues. It's funny when Nick Saban said his quarterback.
Come on now. I haven't been this excited about Jimbo quotes since we were talking about lasers on top of the field goal posts, since we were talking about peanuts in Coca-Cola as a West Virginia delicacy. It's really been a minute since we've gotten him, but he has a lot of confidence right now. And basically, to me, it's telling the rest of the college football to step their game up when it comes to the name, image, and likeness operation.
Also, I don't know if Jimbo's gotten an elocution coach lately, because usually when he gets fired up, like, he's a quick talker. And when he gets fired up, it's the words really blend together. But he was fired up today, but he was clear and concise.
He practiced this.
Yeah.
I'm fairly sure.
Come on.
I think so. Look, you're not getting kids just because of NIL, right? You actually do have to bust your butt texting them all the time, figuring out who's the kind of the decider. Is it mom, dad, high school coach, uncle, shady handler, 7-on-7 coach, whomever? Pick one. You have to recruit these guys. You have to establish real relationships. You have to be a place they actually want to go, and facilities and things like that certainly do matter. To say that it doesn't play any role in putting together the best class of all time when it's very clear that the Texas A&M is doing a tremendous job with NIL for its current players, which of course can't be inducements. Sure. Lane Kiffin, do we have the Lane Kiffin drop or do we basically have what he said?
No, I don't have the drop set up for that.
He jokingly called for a salary cap. Here we go. We don't have the funding resources at some schools with the NIL deals. It's like dealing with salary caps. And then he called for a salary cap on Texas and Texas A&M specifically. And I took Jimbo's comments, like, clearly he mentioned Saban and Bryce Young getting $1 million and Saban acknowledging that. I took his comments to be more about Kiffin for Kiffin popping off on Twitter, because he's like, and some of those guys who do this stuff, they hit the transfer portal harder than we do. Because we got to remember, coaches still think of the transfer portal as a little, maybe not a great thing. And I kind of pieced that together because Kiffin had tweeted out the transfer portal king graphic, which involved him somebody photoshopping Kiffin on top of the Tiger King, which I took it then at a shot at Brian Kelly when Ole Miss passed LSU in our transfer portal rankings. I know this is kind of like crazy conspiracy theory, but if you follow like the SEC coach tweets and whatnot, anyway, Jimbo's basically saying, step your game up and mind your own business, because I've been in this league for a long time. And let's go all the way back to 4 weeks ago when he said, there's been a lot of NIL going on before we knew what to call it, before it was called NIL.